Today, I'm talking with Dr. Kelly Kent, neuroscientist, co-founder of the Mastermind Institute and faculty at Antioch University, where I had the privilege of learning from her. Kelly is also a former Culver City Unified School District Board president, and she brings a rare mix of brain science, education, and leadership to everything she does. Through Mastermind Institute, Dr. Kelly helps executives, coaches, and teams use neuroscience to improve performance, communication, and decision-making. Dr. Kelly, thanks for joining us.
I'm really happy to be here.
So you've spent years looking at the teenage brain from both a neuroscience and policy perspective. If you had to describe one thing most parents underestimate about the teen brain, what would it be?
Definitely, it's indefatigable plasticity. It's just got unlimited potential. I think even those of us who are really trying to educate ourselves about learning and about how much room the brain has for growth still are kind of holding on to these old dogmas that we had, that we're kind of born with all the neurons that we're ever going to have, or we come with these God-given talents, and that we either have it or we don't. And even if we are trying to break out of that, as the science is telling us to, we're still hanging on to those. But the reality is, the evidence shows us that we can master any skill with just a couple of assets and resources and support and time. And so really it's that anything is possible, and not in a like blow smoke up your butt kind of way, but actual biologically sound kind of way. Mm-hmm. And that it's not over at 18. There's still a whole other 10 years of a very, very, very sponge-like brain period. And kids are kids till they're 30, and they're gonna have the potential to master any number of skills.
Yeah. I remember you saying at 14, you're only halfway through the process of building a skill.
Right, because that's right, because then 28, yeah.
Yeah.
And if you think of adolescence as that like really sensitive skill building period, if it starts at 12, maybe 11, uh-huh. I mean, that's a long time, from 11 or 12 to 29. You got plenty of time to do magic.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the magic of working with teens, is you can really, big changes can happen. Mm-hmm. Yeah. How did being a parent change how you think about brain science and education?
As we just finished that previous conversation, it did occur to me what my parenting lens has brought, because I have an 18-year-old, she just turned 18, and she's still a kid. Mm-hmm. So it's really this piece, she's about to go to college, we're all kind of nervous and anxious and excited and stressed. But she's still totally a kid. And there is, of course, the parent perspective of you'll always think your baby is your baby. I'm sure that's there. Mm-hmm. But I can tell she still feels like a kid, right? And so it gives me comfort to not feel like, wow, what I've done up till now, it better have worked.
Yeah.
Like my time as an influence, as any sort of support, it's not over. I still have lots of time to be there for her and to help her do exactly what she wants to do.
That's nice. So it's not like 18.
The role of parents in young people believing in themselves and still knowing there's still so much potential for growth is really important.
You once said in class, you get better at what you practice, for better or worse. What does neuroscience tell us about that idea?
Yeah, it's really all about time. Mm-hmm. I mean, especially in, child and adolescent development, there's just a ton of pressure on parents. There's just a ton of pressure on how best to child rear. Mm-hmm. And there's also an age-old philosophy about good enough. Mm-hmm. And I think good enough really fits here as well. The point being, where you spend your time is where you will become a master of that skill. And so if you want to master something, spending the time on it makes sense, but I think we don't intentionally think about how we're spending the rest of our time. So I'll consciously decide I'm gonna train for the marathon, I'm gonna spend time, that makes sense, right? But I'm not as intentionally thinking about the rest of my hours and the rest of my days of the week. Well, what I'm not doing, or what I am doing when I'm not training to run, also really matters, not only for the marathon, but for like my whole happiness and health. In psychotherapy, we talk about people like perseverating on a thought or ruminating, and that this can be really maladaptive. And we want to try to break that habit, those intellectual and emotional patterns are building skills just like gym, working out, riding a bike, learning to cook is a skill set. So every single thing is a skill set. Emotionally, intellectually, we have one brain, they are not separate.
Okay.
So how we spend our time is really how I look at that question. What we practice, we get better at, for better or worse.
Well, here's a follow-up to that question, because when you try any skill and you're new at it, you're not terribly good. So the question is how to practice. So you even said this in class, it's error versus quitting. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between those two things?
Yeah, so firstly, error is really important.
Okay.
And one thing for sure, I think that makes it obvious behaviorally,
Okay.
is that you can only know you're spending your time practicing where you need to be practicing, what you need to be practicing, if you're making mistakes.
Okay.
It's the only way you know. If you're already carrying out the task in a way that looks to some observer as if you've mastered it, then you're necessarily doing something you're already good at.
Okay.
And it may be fun. Like, let's talk about piano. So you will naturally tend to do the part of the piece that you favor. It's often coming to you the easiest. And it may be enjoyable, but it is probably not the part that you need to practice the most. The only evidence you have of needing to practice something and that you should therefore spend your time there is the error itself. And it doesn't mean that you spend time making repeated errors. It means that you fix them.
Okay.
Often you need a mentor or an expert to point those spots out to you, because again, we'll tend to do what's most pleasurable, and it may be also what's easiest and what we've already mastered. But the piece about quitting is an interesting one, because another measure of knowing where you need to be is that you want to stop.
Okay.
There's really great literature on superagers.
Okay.
And how you get to be in your 80s and 90s and still retain all of that cognitive capacity is by learning new things, and that through the pursuit of learning those new things, that they continue through the sticky part. Like, they really want to, I'll use running again because I'm a runner. You really want to stop. That's how you know you have to push through it just a little bit longer, not to the point of dehydration or collapse or something, but you need to get through that sticky period. The discomfort is important for two reasons. One, it's probably telling you that you're in that error-prone space, meaning you need to do the practice. But two, it's your brain's way of understanding that it is important for survival.
Yeah.
So the brain really is only going to devote resources to retaining something that's learned over the course of the day that it thinks is important for survival. How's it going to know it's important for survival? Well, if you're really worked up about it, meaning very uncomfortable, very aroused, but also passionate maybe because you love it, but are going crazy because you really want to stop, that's a yes or no. For the brain, that's an absolute yes. This must be important for survival. If it's causing this much arousal and stress and maybe duress, this must be really, really important. And then you get the glucose you need and the oxygen you need and some tissue building that's going to create growth in the brain.
Okay.
I hope that helped.
It did help. And then you'll have ideally one would have a mentor to distinguish between necessary mistakes and bad habits.
Yeah, because masters don't become masters without mentors. There's almost, actually I don't think there is a case.
Yeah.
Mastery doesn't mean you do something really well. It means you're going to win like the international award for that thing. So mastery is a pretty narrow scope. It's you're really at the top. You're in the elite level. And so you don't get to mastery without another master guiding you for exactly what you just pointed out. Because, people in education have long known that homework can be very problematic if students are at home redoing a problem incorrectly.
Oh, yeah.
Over and over and over again, they're rehearsing. So errors are important, but only in the context of the potential to correct them. Of course, repeating an error makes you really good at doing it wrong.
Repeating the error, okay, yeah. Are the neural mechanisms that drive learning and skill acquisition the same ones that support growth in mental health? So is learning how to ride a bike similar to having a positive mindset?
We do not have a separate intellectual and emotional brain.
Okay.
there's such a misunderstanding that we can check our emotions at the door when we go to work, or, you know, that we really need to compartmentalize. You know, I think like in an everyday sense, we can relate to that, we can understand that, and maybe there is something to say for so-called compartmentalizing, but biologically speaking, that's not a thing. So we do not have any intellectual capacity that is free of emotion. Our best intellectual product is very emotionally salient to us.
Okay.
You know, that's when in fact, I'm having such a good time here with you because I care so much about the brain, right? And that's when I'm gonna perform my best. So since there is no difference, this is all to say we get better at what we practice, for better or worse, including mindset, emotional regulation. Emotional skill building is no different than physical skill building. They should be treated exactly the same way. Emotional pain looks the same as physical pain in the brain. So we know that there is a profound misunderstanding about the difference between intellect and emotions, or physical skill building and, you know, emotional skill building, and they're not different.
You've said a lot about practice, and you've alluded to the fact that screens can interfere with our ability to practice. Can you tie that into the default mode network we have, and maybe explain that in parent-friendly terms?
Screens can confer a lot of value to teens and developing brains. So I'm going to share some comments that I hope really come off as judgment-free. And there's a lot of value in particular with like social gaming. So online gaming, you and I have talked about virtual reality gaming. Any practice at social relations for adolescents is exceptionally valuable. So if that's happening via an online platform or a screen, it's still really valuable. And it is also true that it is a very different kind of social skill building than you would do in person. And so both need to be present. So that's one thing that I was alluding to before, is that when thinking about the number of hours spent time practicing skill sets, there's a very important developmental window during adolescence, and again, that's all the way through 29, where you have to build social skills, and they have to be practiced in person as well as via screens. But to get to this other piece about the default mode network, which is one of my favorite things to talk about because it's extremely under-recognized. I mean, most people have never heard of it. It is a separate attentional network from the one that we use most of the time. So I have to take in a lot of social cues from you, you know, body language cues, auditory cues. I have to take in external stimuli, process it, make a choice, and then produce something in response to that or to meet some goal. But there's an entirely separate, and they're really non-overlapping, attentional network that is in science terms called the default mode network, but in like regular layperson terms called just an internal reflective network. When we are attending internally, we're actually ignoring the external cues. So we will be tuning out sound, we will be tuning out light, we'll be tuning out temperature, etc. Those things are still there, but we are not attending to them. Screens do not allow us to get into that internal attentional network. They will prohibit that because we're unable to ignore that kind of stimuli. It is so attention grabbing. It's very hard to ignore. It also is very rewarding in the brain. Screens are very rewarding for a variety of reasons. And so it's impossible to ignore. It'd be like trying to ignore someone saying your name. It's very, very practiced and rehearsed and almost impossible to ignore. And so because we spend so little time in our internal reflective network in this day and age where we're very dependent on screens, there's a whole set of skills that we're kind of under practicing. And they happen to be creativity, empathy, and deep cognitive understanding, which are each in turn a kind of connecting new to old. Like my perspective taking, if I were to, you know, really work on my empathy toward you, it would be in the context of my own experience. So I might really understand how Nick is feeling because I too have felt that way one time. So I'm connecting your experience, this new thing that I haven't actually experienced myself, to something I have experienced, which is old. Same thing with creativity. You're making something new out of something old. Same thing as deep cognitive understanding. You're taking something new, very intellectually challenging, calculus class during period 2 today, and it may feel so abstract and so not relevant for maybe my career choice until something settles in that night and I realize, actually, it does have a relationship to my obsession with the stars, or it has a relationship to my obsession with a particular athletic pursuit, or I don't actually know what calculus is super related to.
But you still have
you
the-
make a connection
Yeah.
between the new and existing, and this really only takes place when we've gotten lost in our thoughts,
Okay.
like completely zoned out.
Yeah.
People are familiar with getting into their default mode network when they're driving a very familiar route. In the shower. What's another one? Probably for you, running. You're a runner, right?
yeah.
So that happens to me. So those are the moments you only know you've gotten into it when you wake up from thinking about something. When you suddenly realize, oh, I was just thinking about, or oh, I realize why my mom's mad at me, or something like that. Right, and so screens can confer a lot of value, but it just means that now in 2025 and going forward, we need to intentionally curate time for nothing. We have to build it in. We have to, make sure we are not listening to, as adults, not listening to podcasts in the shower, trying to turn off audio stimuli in the car on a familiar drive. If we can zone out during the runs, those are really important. But now I always encourage my students, even when you're queuing up, if you're in line for coffee, like don't look at your phone. I know we all have that tendency, and the kids are watching us do it, right? So if we're in the doctor's office with our adolescents, the kids watch us pull out our phone when we're bored and waiting for the person to talk to us at the window. Like model the behavior of allowing time for nothing, daydreaming. It's golden. Because it's not easy to do nothing, especially now that we've trained ourselves to be very distracted and busy. So it can feel very itchy. And, for ruminators, it can be really nightmarish. You may need to walk at first and not be sitting still.
Okay. Shifting gears, what does the science say about how much deep, uninterrupted sleep teens actually need for learning and memory?
Well, I mean, teens need 8 to 9 hours of sleep. Sleep experts prescribe that. Like, that's not an expertise I have per se, but if you're asking about this piece of uninterrupted, that is really important. And the way that you prevent the disruption is you just make sure that there are no bots in the room.
Okay.
Phones especially are like somebody calling your name repeatedly.
Yeah.
So I know you and I probably do this. We leave our phones in our room at night, and we are convincing ourselves that it's fine. We've put on Do Not Disturb. It's silent. The light is turned down.
Yeah.
We're lying to ourselves.
It's just saying my name over
it
and
is
over.
calling our name constantly
Okay.
throughout the night. So young people really need to get those devices out of the room. If computers are in the room, they have to be turned off. The alarm should not have a screen. The phone should be out of the room. All those iPads.
Okay. It's so funny, even
Laptops,
now I have my
shut off.
questions here, and I'm like, oh, maybe I should.
No.
Yeah,
For this
yeah.
purpose,
There you
listen,
go.
we need it for work.
Okay,
Right?
okay.
They need it for school. Do they need to take maybe weekly, monthly, certainly annual screen time breaks? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do young people need to get time off entirely, where there are multiple days in a row where they are not pulled into screens? Yes. I think that's really, really important. It's really important for you and I as well.
Okay.
But it doesn't mean that we are Luddites.
Yes.
And that we don't use the technology.
But have it serve
it's
us,
very
not the
important.
other way around.
Yeah.
Through the Mastermind Institute, you coach executives and leaders from a neuroscience perspective. So you look at habits, mindset, motivation, and action, right? And is that tailor-made to each individual? Is there any general advice? Can you talk more about that?
What are the assets that the brain has that we can really take advantage of? And by the way, there are a couple shortcomings. Like,
Okay.
I love the brain. It's beautiful. I'll talk about it forever. Indefatigable plasticity is one of my favorite things to say.
Yeah.
And we do not have unlimited attentional bandwidth. That's a shortcoming, right?
Okay.
We can't multitask. People are telling themselves that they can multitask, and it's a big fat lie. It's not an intentional lie because, we're hearing that. we have lots of job descriptions calling for multitaskers, and that should not be a skill that we are seeking.
Okay.
Actually, what we really want is people who are good at ignoring distractors and spending time deeply focused.
Yeah, yeah.
But then also willing to take breaks. So
So if I have a very ambitious goal I want to achieve, I'm not quite sure how to achieve it, what advice would you have for me?
well, we're going to do some 101s on the brain, because
Okay.
we're going to tap into, like, are there emotional barriers
Okay.
that are preventing you from sitting down and doing the practice that needs
Yeah,
to be
yeah.
done? Are there things maybe that you, need to know? Like, do you think that you can multitask, and is that preventing you from performing at your cognitive best? Because you're never multitasking, you're task switching. So when you switch back to the thing that you really want to do well, you're actually at much compromised capacity after you've distracted yourself and come back to it. You have a big, it's called task residue. Takes like 60% longer to be at the same productive capacity after you've switched. Like, if you were writing a paper as a graduate student, then you checked your social media,
Yeah.
and you came back,
Yeah.
it would take you 2/3 longer
I don't
than it
know
would
anything
have
about that, so.
previously.
Okay.
Cal Newport is an author of a book called Deep Work, which talks a lot about
Okay,
that.
okay.
So anyway, these would be the things, right? Like, hopefully empower you to know the brain is beautiful and has this no ceiling capacity, and there are some things we need to make sure that we understand about, like, and I would never say limits, but shortcomings,
Okay,
right? So
okay.
attention is one of them,
Yeah.
but also, the need for rest. Like, we can't do our best on a poorly fed, poorly hydrated, stressed, under-rested brain.
Okay.
I know it seems so simple, but
But
people,
they
undervalue these
that.
things.
Yeah, yeah. What's the most underrated brain healthy habit for teens?
Discomfort.
Okay.
They have to be uncomfortable. They will constantly complain and complain and complain, and parents are very uncomfortable with complaining.
Okay.
And parents need to grit their teeth and bear with it and get their teens to stick to it.
Yeah, yeah.
Not give up.
Your go-to phrase when a teen says, I'm bored?
It's really important to have time for nothing. We explained why.
Okay.
And they don't want to hear about what it was like when I was growing up and how there was more natural time for
Okay,
being bored
okay.
built into our lives. So maybe that isn't the way to go. But I do talk to them about how important it is for their brains all the time. So they're sick of hearing it, but yes.
They hear it all the time. Okay.
I always say that I know I'm an excellent parent when they say that.
And then one of the most important things to model as a parent, I'm sure there are many, but one that comes to mind.
Oh, being off my phone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So not sleeping with it in my room,
Yeah.
not pulling it out at every opportunity, every moment that I'm bored, people watching,
Okay.
talking in the car. Don't chauffeur your kids.
Yeah.
Have them put away their devices, take their headphones off, chat with you in the car. That's really valuable skill building time. Of course,
Okay.
it's important for bonding. Any parent knows that, but it's a skill building opportunity. That's that interpersonal relationship, social skill stuff that has to happen in person. It's a great opportunity for that.